And I'll just first start by asking if there was anything that came up after the training. If there's a question out there you would like me to address before I jump into the content for today. Okay, I'll take that as a no. And so where we're starting today is in your handout, starting on page 20, there's a heading at the top that says session 3. And so here we are today. Again, the plan is to go about an hour and a half with content and save time at the end for questions. So I am, based on what Heidi and I talked about, I am trying to protect time for questions at the end. So feel free to do that. So today is going to largely be focused on reporting, but there were a few other things that I wanted just to make sure you had an understanding of before we get into that topic. So on page 20, the first thing that I'm mentioning is sending invoices, sales receipts, reports, right, to your treasurer or people that you report to, your supervisors, via email. And to do that directly from QuickBooks without having to export reports to Excel, just as an example, and send an attachment as an email, you can set up QuickBooks so that you can email these things directly from the application. And that's what it saves you, right? It saves you that time. And so, of course, we're going to start by going to Edit, Preferences.
She's never done anything like this before.
And I'm looking at my Quick Launch area, and where I'm starting is Send Forms, right? So Send Forms, you're going to see at the very bottom. And you'll notice that there are My Preferences, and then there are also Company Preferences. And so the first screenshot that I have for you is, if you haven't already done this, and if you're interested in doing it, is you're going to need to add your web email here. And what I did in this training file was I just used my own Gmail account. What you do is you click this Add button at the bottom, and you're going to put your email ID in, and then you'll select your provider here. Now, I have worked with organizations that have their own website, and sometimes if you have mail through that, .org or whatever, QuickBooks doesn't quite pick that up. So that might be a little bit of a challenge for you. I know other organizations will have a Gmail account or an Outlook account to make that capability for them to send something out via QuickBooks much more seamless. But give that a try if that's something you'd want to do. So the first step is the My Preferences tab. And then where we're going to jump to is Company Preferences. And what I have done is, you can see that there are different forms here that you can send things through, and we'll see some of those. What I did was I chose the sales receipt form. And the reason that we have different forms like in that list is because we can create templates that we use in our emails by which we send that form, so that you can have custom email templates for invoices, sales receipts, reports. Maybe those are the 3 basic things that you'll be sending. And so each form comes with a basic form, and I'm just going to edit that. So that is the default, you can see, right? And then what I did was I added a template. I just clicked Add Template, and what happens is that basic template drops in. and then you do modifications. And I'll just show you the one that I already created just to try to save time. This donation form, I'm going to edit it and set it as the default. So when I click edit template, so my donation here is my sales receipt name. And you can see what I did was I just customized the text of the email. Thank you for your generous donation. We appreciate your support. Sincerely, blah, blah, blah. So the fields, and I also in the subject line, I edited that. And you can see this is sort of mimicking a mail merge capability. So they're merge fields. So the dear, first name, last name is actually going to be pulling from the information that you set up for that customer record. So I'm just going to click here and click save. And I'm not sure why I'm not connecting to set that as the default. I'm getting a little weirdness going on here, but you do have that capability. So you can create, for example, for reports that you send out, and I'll show you a little bit later, you can create your own template, right? I will just edit this template so that you can see what, I'm having some slowness issues here. But you could see how you could edit that template. So what I'm just going to do is try to cancel out of that window. That window was not reacting for me. So I haven't gotten any message that I have a problem with my internet connection. So I guess you'll just have to trust me on that one. You can see the screenshots there for you to follow along with. And so what I wanted to do was there's kind of a cool thing going on here, I think, with sending emails. This helps me and other people that I work with. So for example, if I create a sales receipt form, I can go through the process and this is where that email button is, right? So if you create one, you can send it via email. What I'm going to show you is I'm just going to go to my customer center quickly here and go to this Sally Smith record. And so there is a receipt already out there that I created that we'll be looking at again today. It's a donation receipt. And so you can see I'm using my template for the donation sales receipt. That was something that we learned about yesterday. And this is where I would click email. And so the email in the from and to field is my email. I set Sally Smith up with my Gmail account because, of course, she's not a real customer. So I wanted to be able to show you when you send an email via customer forms or even vendor forms, there's a tab that tracks that email was sent. So especially with donations, I was thinking this might be a handy thing for you all. So I'm not going to go through the process of sending because I'd have to log back into my Gmail account. So that's one thing that you have to do for each QuickBooks session. So when you get in, the first email you send, you have to make that connection to your Gmail account. The other thing that I want to say here is for me as a Gmail user, the security is always changing. And so you may have to, in Gmail, when you're setting up the connection between QuickBooks and Gmail, what you may have to do is allow unauthorized applications in your security settings through Gmail. So that's kind of a mouthful. But if Gmail isn't doing a handshake with QuickBooks because of Gmail's security or Outlook security, just Google that and Google the steps that you have to go through in your Google account in order to allow external applications access to Gmail. So what I'm going to do is just cancel. That's what it looks like. And I've already sent that email earlier. And again, I'm on my customer center here looking at my customer, Sally Smith. And if I go to send email, you'll see that QuickBooks is keeping track of those emails for you, which I think is kind of a cool thing. I don't know. I guess at my age, any little help I can have in terms of reminding me what I've sent out is a good thing. So we'll see how that happens as you get into sending reports to different people too, how you have access to email there. So we're really gonna shift gears now, going on to a different topic that is on page 21. And I'm just gonna brush through this. You know, I don't have a real company file, so I don't have a bank statement with an ending balance. I just wanna make sure that you all realize how important reconciliation is. And where we find that is in a couple different places. There's a shortcut to reconcile here in your banking pane. You can also go to banking. We talked briefly about bank feeds. This is where you go to set up a bank feed if you wanted to do that process. And right above that is reconcile. And remember, we reconcile bank types of accounts and also credit cards. So I showed that briefly yesterday. I'm just going to go into a bank type and I'm just going to fake an ending balance here. So what you would be doing, of course, is you would have a bank statement there and you would have your beginning balance, and that defaults from reconciliation to reconciliation. And you would be looking at your bank statement and you would be plugging in your ending balance there. In this begin reconciliation window, I have a screenshot of that for you on the top of page 21. You'll see that you can enter certain things, right? And because we have class tracking on, if you have any services or interest earns, certainly you'd be able to class that. And again, I'm calling that admin kind of class. What I'm going to do is just talk again about the importance of reconciliation. Reconciliation means, of course, that your entries in QuickBooks match what your statements say. So that's a lot of monetary where the rubber meets the road. So we have to make sure that we do that. So I'm just going to click continue. All these reconciliation windows look the same, whether or not it's a petty cash bank type of account or a credit card. So it's very much like in the olden days, they had this kind of on the back side of your paper bank statement when we used to get those. And so what we're doing is we're just doing a matching here, right? We're going to say, oh, yeah, that deposit was there. So was that one. This check was there. This one was there, right? So we're just checking off what matches. And I'm sure you all have gone through this. There are two areas that you want to keep track of. You want to keep track of this right-hand corner, because when your difference is 0, that is when you can click reconcile now. And even if you're a few cents off, I recommend to my clients, you've got to have due diligence, because we know that a few cents off could mean that you have, you know, a 502-cent debit and a $500 credit. And it isn't just 2 cents off. It could be more than that. So we need to have accurate books. So we really need to be vigilant about reconciling when that says 0. Another area that's helpful for you is the beginning balance. So deposits and other credits, checks and payments, you can kind of match that to those summary level totals that you'll see on your bank statement. You know, I'm not at 0, so I'm not going to click reconcile now. If you were at 0 and clicked reconcile now, the next step that QuickBooks is going to bring up is a question. Do you want to print summary or detailed reports? And again, if you're newer, I would recommend that you print all reports. Maybe you don't need all. The detail is going to give you what you didn't check, right? What is still open and hasn't cleared through your bank or credit card yet. As well as cleared items. I think it's a great paper trail that you can put in a file of your reconciled bank statements, especially if you get off later, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. If you have paper statements, it's a great thing to staple to your paper statement for a good paper audit trail. So what I'm going to do is just click leave. And I want to go into my check register and show you some indicators here on transactions that I marked. So what you see in this column when you're in the process of reconciliation is you see an asterisk or a star in that column. That means you're in the process of reconciliation. If you're doing a bank feed, you'll see a lightning bolt in this check mark column. So that lightning bolt is an indicator that that transaction was added into your register from your bank feed. When you click reconcile now, those indicators, the lightning bolt and this asterisk that you see here, will change to a check mark. And that's a very important indicator for you, because what you have said is that transaction was real, it happened, it was either a deposit or a debit, a payment out of whatever account you're reconciling. And so you need to be very careful about modifying those anytime in the future. That's usually how the beginning balance gets thrown off for people in reconciliation. Somebody has made a mistake and has deleted, which we talked about voiding versus deleting yesterday. But, you know, deleting a reconciled transaction is done extremely carefully because you have to re-input that exactly. You know, banks make mistakes too, right? And so maybe you have two accounts and maybe something gets put into the wrong account, but it was on the statement and you cleared it. So sometimes it feels awkward to us, but we sort of have to mimic in QuickBooks the mistakes that our banks make. So, so that those opening balances have that integrity as you move forward. You know, your balance sheet type of accounts are rolling balances, right? So everything that happens in them just sticks with you forever. So we need to make sure that we have that integrity in terms of mimicking exactly what happened, even if it was a mistake. And I even do that when it's just an offset, right? To show that that transaction occurred, it was, let's say, a deposit into the wrong account. We see the debit out of that account and then the credit into the other account. So that is what I do. And I'm sure some of you do that, and maybe you do it differently. So if you have any input, shout it out. Reconciling. Just wanted to foray into that. So our next topic, if you're ready to move on, is in-kind donations. We sort of dabbled into that briefly, and I want to just talk about that in a little bit more detail. I'm on page 22 in your handout, and in-kind donation. Excuse me. Oh, sorry about that. I'm not sick. I'm okay. So the first thing that we do, of course, is I'm just going to jump into the chart of accounts. And so what we have is we have an in-kind donation income account on our chart of accounts. And we also will have a donated goods and services expense account. Because for this in-kind donation, it's going to be a wash, right? It's a zero charge, but especially if we're getting a donation for a program or something, we want to make sure that we record that we give the donor the appropriate paperwork that they need for their own tax purposes. And to that, giving them the right paperwork, that's why I personally would say to give that person a sales receipt. And we talked about that just a little bit yesterday. So if we're going to use a sales receipt, then what we need to do is make sure we have our item list set up, because these forms are driven by items. You know, you could do this with a journal entry, but again, you're not going to get that form that you could send to the donor. So you'd have to do that externally from QuickBooks. So I'm going to go to my list command on my menu bar and go to my items list. And so I just have, you know, some ideas here, like in-kind contributions. Maybe it's books that were donated. Maybe it was seeds that were donated. And so we also then have the offset of the donated goods. And of course, those kinds of items are pointing to that income, in-kind contribution in the expense account that I showed you before. So when I do a sales receipt, and I'm just going to go back to my customer center and jump into that one for Sally Smith that I already created. And I'm going to double click on that. And what I see is Sally Smith had an in-kind donation of seeds worth $25 for the class of our community garden. And of course, I'm going to expense that out so that it is ultimately a zero transaction in QuickBooks. And I like using that form again. So if you need, if you're using customers and you're looking at that customer center, that gives you the ability to see that history kind of quickly in that transaction list, as well as emailing that customer that form. And we talked about that long text disclaimer so that you could provide tax information to that donor. So what I'm showing you on page 22 in your handout is I'm showing you that concept of using the sales receipt, and as well as what you can see on the customer center when you use those kind of forms. So I'm just going to take a quick look also, starting to get into a little bit of reporting. I just, on page 23, I just want to jump into, if I went into reports, company and financial, profit and loss by class, and we'll break this down a little bit more, but what I just wanted you to see, this is a report that is showing contributions and donations by class as well as expenses. So I can see that in-kind contribution there, and I classed it to the community garden, and I can also see it expensed out. So I see the in and out by class on the job profitability report. We'll get into that in more detail. I also wanted to show you at the bottom of page 23, if I go to reports and if I go to my sales report, if I went to a sales by item and I'm just picking summary report, and I will say for this fiscal year. So what I can see is I can see a breakdown by item. And so this kind of report might be helpful to you. Remember on my items list, I had in-kind contributions and I had a number of sub-items. I've only used one of those, but I can see a breakdown of the contributions in this case by item. So that's going to give you more detail by that item name. And you can see how we have non-inventory parts, seeds there. And you can also see, and this is sales, so I've sold some seeds. And you see other charges are grouped together. We talked a little bit about how we pick item type. And one of the important considerations with that is how items are grouped together by the type you selected on reports. So remember, items are many to one, right? Many kinds of items would point to one. I'm just going to pick the income side, like in-kind contributions. So at the item level, that's where you could see your detail of what people are donating. I'm just going to close out of that report. And I'm going to just stick a little topic in here that wasn't in your handout. And this is just an idea for you. And Heidi and I didn't quite connect soon enough on this for me to get it in your handout, but I do understand that some of you are tracking volunteer hours. And this is an idea for you on tracking that. I've worked with other organizations that have volunteers and they track it outside of QuickBooks in Excel. And maybe that will give you more than what I'm going to show you here in QuickBooks. But these hours, because we never put them through payroll, are non-monetary transactions. So if you're having to sort of price things because it's a match or something that you have to have for a grant, Excel might be appropriate, since we'll never pay the donors through QuickBooks or the volunteers through QuickBooks. It's kind of cool though, so maybe it'll just give you an idea.
Yeah, Allison, in the oh, I'm sorry. In the chat, we have supervisors that are on our boards, and they do these 310 inspections, and they have in-kind hours that they would track. And I've never even tracked mine at all. And one of the folks in the chat box was like, "Oh, maybe we could use this to track 310 inspection in-kind hours for supervisors." So that's really cool. We were just talking about it in the chat, and then you went into it.
Oh, good. Great. So there is a list in QuickBooks that you probably know of. It's called the other name list. And this list can get a little bit junky because we throw names onto this list because we don't know where to put them. You know, that's a symptom of confusion between, is this a customer or is this a vendor? Is it another names list? Sometimes we have customers who are also vendors. You know, there may be somebody that donates to you, but maybe they also sort of administer a program for you and they get compensation and you do a 1099 for them, or I don't know how you do that, but they also need to be on the vendor list. And so what I do with that kind of confusion is, and I'm not sure I have an example here, it's just kind of popping in my brain. I guess I do. So do you see the state of Montana -C? You can't have two names on, two of the same names on different lists. And so just to keep it clear in my brain, that's how I do it. State of Montana on the customer list -C, and that's just my name, right? That they'll never see. On the vendor list, I would do the same thing, -V. It keeps it alphabetically in the right order, and then it also is just quite a visual for me, so I know that I'm in the right list. The other names list. Classically, the other names list for your kind of organization is going to be volunteers. I have only entered one there. Now, we're going to go to the enter time icon. And even if, I don't have payroll turned on in my company file. So you don't have to have payroll turned on in order to be able to use this enter time icon. And so I'm going to click enter time. And I believe you'd want to use your weekly timesheet. And the first thing that you do here is you pick a name. And you can do a quick fill on this. My only volunteer name is Volleyanne. Isn't that creative of me? And so this is just like an Excel spreadsheet, right? Where I have columns of items to fill out. So when you're in a timesheet, the only available item that you have is a service type of item. So I set up a service type of item called volunteer time. And it's never gonna be billed against, right? It's never gonna be invoiced against because this is all donation. But it can track the hours for you. So I have Anne volunteering for the community garden program. So if it's your supervisors doing, audit work or whatever, you might put that in admin. You might even have a service item type that is specific to that particular number of hours that you want totaled in reports. And so what I did was I added just a few hours here for this week. So I did that earlier, so I don't have to save it. There is a button, of course, at the bottom. Save and new if you wanted to do the next week and the next week, right? You can keep the form open and do it pretty quickly. One thing that's important, however, is see this billable column out here? This is a tough field on a timesheet to make that default check mark go away. I showed you in class number 1 under edit preferences how we can take that billable time away when we're entering bills, so we don't have to always remove that check mark. But we're never going to bill this time to anybody, and we're never going to pay them for it. We just want this form to track their time.
And we had one question, Allison. Is that enter time function, do you know if it's on the Premier version?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
So maybe your settings are just a little off, Kay. I don't know. Kay says she's unable to see that enter time function.
Right.
She found it now, though.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I just had to scroll down. I apologize.
So, yeah, that should be there by default. Whenever you don't see an icon, you want to make sure that you think edit preferences, because a lot of these things are turned on and off when you went through that initial setup process with your company file. Okay, now in terms of reporting those hours. And this didn't make it into your handout, right? So if you're a note taker like I am, an idea that I'm giving you is to put these people you need to track hours against, and they may be doing different services for those hours, and you want to keep track of those differences. So other names list, and then items that are service types of items. And you could even have a parent item called, tracking hours or something, and then you could have underneath that, you know, your supervisor service item and then kind of other volunteer service items. Because remember, we can filter to item type on reports. So that's another level of detail that allows me to really drill down to exactly what I want to see and report on. So other names, get your items, your service type of items set up correctly, and then that enter time. There are two that you can use. You can use the weekly, and you can also use a single activity. But you know, I think that that's a big waste of time, because usually, I don't know, a lot of this has to do with, in QuickBooks, there are third-party products or third-party capabilities that you can plug in so that you can have, like, if you're an attorney, you know, the clock is ticking while you're doing work for a client. Now, reports. Reports, jobs, time, and mileage. And usually, you'll notice on that time, I put a class on it, right? It was the outreach parent and then the sub of the community garden. We're going to get into this topic right after I generate this report, okay? So it may make more sense once we delve into this detail. But I'm going to do a time by job detail report. So the default that you can see here is I didn't put a name on that report. For this particular work that she did, it didn't need a name, right? It wasn't for a specific grantor or grant. It was just for the program. Now, your supervisors, like, you could create a name and maybe you already have it. Maybe you have in your customer job list, you have your district name there. So if you wanted to put that name in, so it showed under, you know, this work that this supervisor did was for the conservation district. So you could do that. That's why this no job assigned is appearing on this report. But in order for me to get class on this report, I have to do this detail. So if class is important to you, you're going to do the time by job detail report. And if this kind of customization is new to you, we're going to be going through customizing reports in this session today. I'm going to go to customize report because I want to see class on this report. That's one thing I want to see. This billing status column, see how I'm in my columns area on this report. Remember, all QuickBooks reports are date sensitive, right? I don't need billing status. That's meaningless to me. But I do want to see class. And I'm going to click OK. So if I want to see who did how much work on volunteer work on a certain program, then this is a great report for that. I'm going to customize this report. And one thing that you'll notice that I don't have is an item. Remember the volunteer hours item, the service item. See how I can't add that? So these reports for you are a little bit quirky because they tend to be payroll focused, because that is QuickBooks intention, primary intention for the enter time sheet. So I'm just going to show you some other ideas. So this is a nice detail report where you can see class. If I went to reports and if I went to jobs, time, and mileage. I could also do some other types of reports. I could do a time by name report. So that's really focusing on what name was associated with that volunteer work. And see how it's not a detail, it's a summary level report. So I'm going to customize this report again. And I want you to notice the difference between what you see in terms of that detailed report I was on, where I could add and remove columns easily. But this is a summary report. We saw that in the report title name. Like a P&L report and a balance sheet report are summary level reports, even though they don't say summary. So there are a few things I can manipulate here. You can see time is time by name by job. But I could also pick a name by an item report here and click OK. So if that item name is important for you to see, so if this is your supervisor name and if their time is spent in different ways and you want an hourly total, maybe this is the report for you.
Just 1 second, Allison. We have a couple of things going on in the chat box here. We might as well go over. Someone had asked if, Lauren, I don't know if you want to expand on this, but they asked, can you do some of this through filters?
Okay, you can. Filtering, what I have been demonstrating here on the customize report command is really the display or the layout of the report. Right? I've changed what I get to see on a summary level report. Some reports will let me manipulate the display, but I can't add columns. If I went to on this report, but remember on that detailed report, I could manipulate the display to add that class column. Filtering is generally used to drill down to what you want to see, to drill down to a specific class. This report is currently all classes, and we won't see a change, but I could drill it down to the community garden class and click OK, and I'm going to see the same thing. But if there was more there, I could drill down to it. But you can see this report, I can't get class on it. I can't get the class column on this summary level report, and I'm going to tell you why I can't do that in a minute. Now I can customize the report, and these screenshots are a little later, and we're going to be going through this a few other times. But I could customize this report, the header and the footer, and I could say, let's see, like a volunteer time for community garden program. I have to be pretty vigilant about changing headers so that people know what they're looking at, because I can't get class to print on this. I can on the other one, and I could also filter the other one to class. So that's the difference. That first tab is, what do I want to see on the report? And the filters tab is drilling down. I don't want to see all classes. I just want to see this one. Whether it's grants you're tracking with classes or programs or some of both. Did that answer?
Thank you, Allison. Did that help, Lorna? Yes, she said.
Okay.
And then we have some more kind of questions going on specifically about tracking mileage and things. I don't know, Kay, would you just like to ask your question?
So currently, to keep track of the mileage that I reimburse my supervisors for when they go to trainings or when they come to normal meetings or anything like that, I currently track it all in Excel, and then I do data entry to write them a check of, what I owe them for. I'm wondering if that can all be done through this process as well to get rid of the redundancy.
So there is vehicle mileage tracking capability in QuickBooks. So if you go to the company command on the menu bar, there is this enter vehicle mileage capability. And so what you set up here, so basically the idea is that your company, like this is the default thought in QuickBooks, that your company has vehicles and you're adding mileage to that vehicle, right? You're keeping track of it for tax purposes. So the vehicle name might actually just, I don't know, be supervisor. I've never done this before. I'm just kind of brainstorming. Maybe that's the name of the vehicle. So you assign mileage by the car. And so this is sort of following tax law, the trip start date and the end date, what the odometer start was, what the odometer end was, and then the total miles. And again, you might want to associate that to your conservation district name. And then QuickBooks is expecting this to be an item for you to report against, as well as for you to invoice a customer for, right? This would be like a mileage reimbursable expense. So I'm not sure what I have on my chart of accounts. So probably an other charge. I'm looking for a mileage. Oh, maybe it's supervisor travel. It would be pointing to that expense. I've got to open that up. However, if I ever use this to reimburse the supervisor, I've put that on the wrong side, right? So I put a check mark like we learned about before. And I found before something about supervisor travel. I have to assign an income account if I ever use it on an income or on an invoice, which of course I won't ever. Maybe I would pick maybe just other revenues, since I don't have anything really set up as a catch-all. Click OK. Of course, you could class something to admin. And then if you wanted to make a note, trip to my district, whatever. And I'm going to take billable off. I'm not sure if I'm going to get an edit here on this customer job name. Okay, so I did. So I have to assign this to a name. I'm just going to quick add and save and close. So that is just a form that you're using. Reports, time, jobs, time, and mileage, mileage by vehicle summary, so this would be based on IRS law, the math that is done there. I'm hoping I can customize that report. It looks like I can't to take this off. I'm going to close. I'm going to do a report, and I'm going to go to the detail, customizing that. See how I can take that off? That is another great example for you to kind of have this understanding of summary versus detail level reports. So I could even maybe customize this report. And
we are getting some feedback, Allison, that ultimately this might be a little more time consuming than all of us are into.
Oh, okay. Okay.
What happens is that a supervisor turns in a mileage report to us, and it's a certain form. I guess at some districts, everybody does things a little bit differently, but they turn in that mileage form to me, and then I put it in QuickBooks as a check to them, and I put it in my classes as this is supervisor mileage or 310 mileage or whatever it is.
Okay.
Yeah, just so you know.
Okay. Well, that's how QuickBooks does it. Again, sort of geared toward a business and what IRS law is in terms of tracking miles. And I don't know what, the report from the supervisor is probably plenty of paperwork for you.
Yeah, it is neat to know all the different functions though that QuickBooks can do. I had no idea that you could do any of these things. So thank you.
Well, thank you for cutting me off. Don't want to go down a rabbit hole. We have a lot to cover and we don't have a lot of time left. So, okay. And thank you for the question. Yeah, it is good just to see what the capability is, because who knows, maybe you'll need to use that for some other reason in some other way. Okay, so we're going to go to page 24. So one thing that's confusing, and maybe you have bumped into this, and I've demonstrated a couple of occurrences of this already, is sometimes you can't get certain pieces of a transaction onto a report. And it's confusing. It's like, why? Why doesn't that show? And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of that to try to solidify this concept that I'm describing that's on page 24. So QuickBooks uses a concept called source and targets for accounting principles as well as in processes based on where things show up in different areas in QuickBooks. And the definition of source is here in your handout. Source is summary level information, and I've given you some examples of what that is. Target is detailed information. So we can see, we just saw in that example of tracking volunteer time, we can see a summary level report doesn't show class because it's considered target or detailed information. So I can see class on detailed reports. It doesn't mean, as was pointed out before, that I can't filter to class on a summary level report as I demonstrated, but you have to be careful about how you label in the header of that report so people know what they're looking at. The third bullet on this page is a keyboard shortcut. It's Control Y, and it displays a transaction journal report that allows you to see source and target information on that transaction. So this isn't something that you're going to do like a lot, but if you're confused about things showing up or not showing up, this might be a helpful thing for you to know about. And so what I'm going to bring up is, and I'm just going to use edit find. We used that yesterday. I'm going to do an amount equal to. What I want to do is find that deposit. I don't know, you probably don't remember. I don't blame you. But it was that deposit form that even if we had Sally Smith's name on it, it didn't show up on her customer job list. And that can be confusing for people. So I'm going to open up that deposit form. And I'm going to do this keyboard shortcut, this Control Y keyboard shortcut. And that brings up this transaction journal report. And what you can see is when we use the deposit form, the target data is the checking account. So that's the primary source data that that transaction gets tagged with. And on the deposit, the detail on that is going to be the name. So we want to make sure that we understand when we use forms and when we generate reports, right? This concept of source and target or summary level data and transaction detail data is going to impact where things show up in QuickBooks. That example of the deposit not showing at the Sally Smith level that we've looked at, and the fact that class tends to be target or detailed information in terms of the way QuickBooks tracks that. So that's a little handy thing, that Control Y. And so I just thought I'd go through a couple examples of this that might be helpful to you and really elevate the understanding of this. And so I'm looking at page 25. And so my example is, and we actually brought this report up yesterday. Let's say you wanted to prepare an accounts payable report to show what outstanding invoices there are. And we talked about that report being under vendors and payables and an unpaid bills detail report. Okay, so I only have, I think, one bill that is remaining outstanding right now. I think we paid some or something like that. And so this is a detailed report. And if I go to customize this report, again, this looks like a detailed display window, right? I can add and remove columns on this. And what I'm looking for is I'd like to add class. And I'm going to click OK. And the class field is empty here. Okay, there is no class showing on this report, even though I added it. And if I went to the bill, it's on there. It's not like this isn't one that I forgot to put a class on. This is very confusing to people. So I'm in the bill, and when I do that keyboard shortcut, Control Y, what I see is class is target or detail information. And so there's sort of another level to this. Even though this says it's an unpaid bills detail report, it's really pulling from accounts payable. right? It's really the focus is that source or accounts payable information. Now, you may not care if you have class or not on an unpaid bill report. I mean, it's an easy report to create, an easy way to report to people what's outstanding. So what I'm mentioning here, are there other reports that you can generate that enables you to get class on them if you look around in QuickBooks? And so, and this isn't perfect, but it gets you closer, especially if you have a number of bills and you may have different people managing programs. And so class is important to you. If I go to reports, accountant and taxes, there is a transaction detail by account report. Okay, so this is just defaulting to this month to date. I'm gonna make this fiscal year, so we'll see more transactions here. See how this is by account? And so there's way more than you want to see on this. And you'll also notice the class column is going to be there. So it's really showing you target and source data. So getting back to that concept of filtering, if I go to customize report, I don't want to see all these transactions. I can filter it to a couple different things. I can filter it and say, you can search these filters. I'm not very good at that. Some of you may be laughing at me. I can filter it to transaction type, just to bills. And I can also filter it I'll get there to the paid status. And I want it just to be open bills. And when I click OK, what I see again is I see source and target data about this. So I can see on the expense side, this is an accrual-based report. I can see the bill, right? I can see the bill here, and then I can also see the class. Again, this is a good demonstration because you don't see class on the other side of the transaction, the source side, the accounts payable side of this transaction. And what I'm showing you there on the next page, page 26 in your handout, I just have a screenshot of that for you at the top. And then just to kind of hammer home, I'm going to make this a cash basis report, and I see nothing, right? Because I haven't paid this yet. So on a cash basis, that bill won't show because I haven't paid for it yet. So that's kind of a confusing concept in QuickBooks, but an important one. Are there any questions about that source and target, summary and detail, that handy control Y? Looking for different reports that can get you the information you need on it. Understanding why, if you're even on a report and you want to see class on that report and you add that column, don't freak out if it shows as blank, right? Try to remember this idea of source and target. Are we good? Okay. So I'm looking at the bottom of page 26 in your handout. And this is just a little bit of a summary about what you're doing with reporting, like some specific things that you'll do. And you're going to be obviously generating reports, and you'll be customizing them in different ways. And I've showed this to you quite a bit today already. So for example, if I went to reports, and if I went to company and financial, and if I went to a profit and loss by class report. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are doing this report. So this report is showing me by program. That's the focus I've been on in my training company file. So I can scroll and I can see, right? I can see that I have 2 workshops, so I can see my total for both workshops. So I just want to talk about customization a little bit here. So customize report, the display tab, I have a screenshot of that for you. This is where we get to choose what we want to see. And so if you are looking at a profit and loss report, let's say for your entire district, right? It's basically a 1-column thing. What can be really handy on that report is show previous period or previous year. I don't have a previous year in my training file to show you, but that can be a nice analysis tool for you to see change, right? Either in and or dollars or percentage, if it's period or fiscal year. Filters, again, allows me to drill down. So for example, I may want to drill down to a class. So this report is looking at all classes, and maybe I want to drill down to workshops. So filtering, again, is drilling if And I don't have all the screenshots of the windows in this modify report area, but if we went here before, remember the header and footer here is, it may be something that I want to change so people know what they're looking at. Workshop programs. And click OK. By the way, you know, this is just making it bigger, smaller, that kind of stuff. I'm going to click OK. And so now I filtered down. Now, you will see on these reports, you will see little in sort of the column header areas. I can expand and collapse detail. And that is nice because sometimes the class list gets to be pretty overwhelming for people. So to be able to expand and collapse is nice. And so we're going to move along to the next page. You know, once you, let's say you have, I don't know, maybe it's a board member, maybe it is a volunteer that helps coordinate workshops for you and you want to report this out. So you don't want to go through the customization that I just showed you. And so you memorize the report. And the memorize report button is right up here, right in the middle. You want to make sure that the parameters that you have set are the correct parameters. This report happens to default fiscal year to date. Obviously, our report basis by default under edit preferences is accrual. So if you really wanted it to be a month to date report because you're reporting monthly balances, you would want to change that right before you memorize it. So just check in on that report parameter. I'm going to click memorize. Now, I'm going to show you in just a minute how to set up memorized report groups. If you memorize it and don't organize your memorized reports into groups, they become a mess. So I have created a program report group and also a grantor report group, and I'll show you how to do this. And I had created some already, so I don't know if this is a duplicate or not, but anyway, workshop programs, I'm going to put it in that group that I created. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to close. So by default, when I go back to reports, company and financial and profit and loss by class, that's my default report, right? That's where I see everything. So if I want to collapse that down, I can. And I'm going to talk about this unclassified column a little bit later. So to get to that memorized report, I go to my reports command on my menu bar, and I go to memorized reports. And I'll be jumping into that memorized report list in just a second. But I want to show you when I go to one program reports, I'm going to see some memorized reports that I would put in that group. I haven't memorized any grantor reports yet. And you see how I'm doing that numbering scheme, because there are memorized reports that QuickBooks throws in here, maybe to give you quicker access to balance sheet and profit and loss. So I'm going to run that report that I just generated, and you'll see that that's where I pick up my memorized report. And I really hate where QuickBooks has put this, because I always want to go to the list command to find my memorized report list, and it's not there. It's under reports, memorized report list. And so what we can see here is we can see the groups that we saw under the reports command on the menu bar. And then you again see my groups that I created, and I customized those so with a numeric scheme so that they would sort to the top. So how you create these groups is in this way. Easy. It's just like every other way you make something in QuickBooks. A right click or going down to the memorized report button in the bottom left-hand corner. And I'm going to go to new group. And I'm going to type a 3, and I'm going to type the supervisors. Okay, these are the reports that I need to generate for my supervisor. And I'm going to click OK. So again, that's just going to sort up to the top so that it'll be easy for you to find what you need. And let's say the supervisor always wants to see workshop programs, like I put it in the wrong group. Just like anything, right? I can go to that little diamond. I'm promoting it to be a parent level group. I'm going to pull it down underneath supervisor, and then I can just inch it in, right? So that it's now part of that group. So if you get it wrong, it's sort of easy to fix, just like we can fix accounts on our chart of accounts, jobs within customer, items, because we decided later that we wanted a parent item, so we can just scooch those items in to make them subs. This is very handy. So again, reports, memorized reports, and now I see that group there. And that's what I'm showing you. I'm just kind of giving you something on page 27 so that you can kind of remember how those things work together. And I'm going to look at page 28. So on page 28, what I'm showing you is I'm just showing you an idea. So for example, if I go to reports, memorized reports, supervisor, I'm going to go to program workshops. So this is just not the exact example, but if I wanted to, I could say what I want to see is total only. Like they don't care about the detail, they just want to see the total of the programs. So I'm just going to close. If I want to reports, memorized reports, this particular report, I memorized it with a total only. This is just one of my programs. And So there's going to be a class column and there's going to be a total column. So if you only want one column to deal with on that report, just say total only. And that'll take some of the noise away from people looking at that report. So at the bottom of page 28 is the idea of batching reports. And this is another reason that you may want to create memorized report groups. So if I go to reports, I can process multiple reports together. Let's say your supervisor is coming and they always want to see these 3 reports. Well, if you build the memorized report to meet the correct parameters and you put them in a group, you can just pick the group So whatever reports are in that group, I can email them. I can email those reports to groups, right? To the person that needs that report. It is a super time saver. So that's another reason to batch your reports together, email, another great reason. We did that email thing right at the beginning of the class. So if you want to send those out as PDF to people who are, you know, on your board, interested, your supervisor, whatever, that's very cool. It's also helpful for you. So if I go to reports, process multiple reports, let's say I want to just display reports that are in the group quickly so that I don't have to keep going to that memorized reports list. I can do that. So that's cool. And I wouldn't say that that's new, but it's, you know, within, I don't know, maybe the last 5 years or something of QuickBooks releases. On page 29, I know you know, I'm just going to do a quick P&L. And I'm just going to pick this fiscal year. I know that you probably know on your reports bar, there is an Excel button. So this Excel button allows me to export a report into Excel, right? I can create a new worksheet. I'm not going to do it right away for this one, but I can create a new worksheet and, well, I'll just click this, create, and I'll get a secondary window. Do you want to put it in a new workbook, an existing workbook, update an existing workbook? And what I've done for you at the top of page 29 is I've printed out this help for you in terms of updating an existing workbook and how it works. So this shows you, and you would browse to pick the one that you wanted to export to the file. It shows you if you've already changed a QuickBooks report in Excel, such as adding formulas or changing format, QuickBooks can update that report and keep most of your changes, including the ones listed. So it isn't perfect, but if you have created a report that is doing some forecasting or something based on your P&L, let's say, and so you've added some Excel calculations, if you keep that report area pretty standard and put your stuff kind of out to the side as your numbers change on your P&L, you can update those by this particular command. So that's pretty cool. Again, maybe within, I don't know, 5 years or so that was added. So reporting, that's one way that we get things into Excel. And then another way is this. And I'm just going to go to my vendor list. So you're going to see on different lists your ability. You'll see also an Excel button in that button bar. And you'll be able to export lists and transactions and also import. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday, you know, that import. would be bringing me up to that add multiple item list entry. Right? And we talked about that copy paste thing between company files. So this is how I could also export a vendor list into Excel, right? And it's giving me some of those same capabilities. What I want to talk to you about a little bit is the comma separated value extension. So by default, the export just throws it into an XLSX format, an Excel format. But sometimes, and that's generally, it looks like a report. And so what that means is in Excel, you'll see blank columns separating data to try to retain that report format from QuickBooks. And that report format, if you want to update an existing worksheet, is important to maintain. Because when you export to Excel, you'll get those formulas, right? That, converts into Excel so that you get those totaling and subtotals, like on your profit and loss report. The CSV format is a little bit more of a record format, so that if you wanted to do more of a copy and paste, maybe back in, you might want to export into Excel and then also look at what that CSV format looks like for whatever list you're exporting. You may not have in the CSV format as many blanks to deal with. So that's just a thought, right? Something for you to think about, that is available to you. And don't always assume it's just a report that you can export, because there's some nice quick shortcuts from some other places. Okay, I'm trying to maintain our timing here. So starting on page 30, just some reports that you obviously will generate. So the profit and loss, and we've looked at that before, right? Company and financial profit and loss standard. I'm going to make this fiscal year. And you know how you can drill down, right? So if I wanted to see where that rental income comes from, I can get the detail behind that. This is where it may be helpful to customize a report and memorize it. I don't have a previous year to show you, but changes from your previous fiscal year will give you some analysis capability with your district, some comparative data based on percent change and dollar change. Of course, remember to memorize reports as you do that kind of analysis. Balance sheet. So in my training with businesses, I say that you should run your profit and loss and your balance sheet at least twice a month and learn to understand those numbers and how these different reports work together. And we've talked about through this training how it's going to be a good training tool for you after you do certain transactions that you may not have that level of confidence with. Run a P&L and see how it changed. Do that before and after. I gave you an example of that in your handout. I was working with a nonprofit client just yesterday, and we had kind of a tricky transaction to enter. And so do those before and after so that you get a real good understanding of the impacts to your numbers. One thing that I want to just throw in here quickly, if you will allow me to, is commenting on a report. You may need to make a note on this. Comment on a report. I click that button. And what that does for me is it opens up little call outs on every line item. And those little call outs allow me to click in that call out. I've got to move a couple things around here. And what that opens up at the bottom of your screen is you can see a little comment area, you know, and maybe I want to let people know that maybe payroll hasn't been processed yet. That's why that balance looks high, or whatever, however you want to comment. And I'm going to save, and you'll see that these are sort of like little footnotes. It's not really as nice as Excel comments, but it still is pretty cool. It's also a way possibly to have a discussion. Let's say you work part-time and you want to get this information to your supervisor, and you want to put those explanations about some of those numbers right there in comments, and then you can email this. What I'm going to do is save this. And I'm going to click OK. I need to move a couple things around here. Okay. And then I'm going to close. So what that commented report is it's a copy of this balance sheet as it exists as of this day. So to find that report again, reports, commented reports, I see the copy of it sitting there in my commented report list. And if I wanted to see that, I could double click, and then I'm getting back to those comments. That's a pretty cool capability, right? And you can manage these here by deleting them or emailing them, printing them, whatever you want to do. And so those commented reports become date stamped on that commented report list. So you really don't, I've never seen any reason to really change the title too much because it's date stamped, but maybe there's a reason for you to do that. Okay, so again, I'm just turning to page 32. Some of the reports that you may want to generate, I'm bumping up against my 30-minute for questions and answers. Just a couple more things I'd like to show you. We've done the profit and loss by class, which is a program level review of data. I think some of you have mentioned you put your grants as classes. What I do want to show you is this report at the bottom of page 32. Reports, company and financial, profit and loss by job. So this is, remember my customer list, how I have grantor names there. And that's what I see here on my profit and loss by job report. So I have a total for the DNRC at the grant level of income and expense. And then I have that detailed out by grant segments. Again, I have these little plus and minus buttons. And so this is going to be everybody, right, that has donated to you. Of course, I could filter, couldn't I? I could filter to specific names. So that's that view of the data, is that profit and loss by job. Now, I'm going to have to go back because I forgot. I'm just going to do a quick profit and loss by class report because I want to talk about this unclassified column. This column is going to be for your mistakes. So for example, I can go here and see that entry. And this is what we talked about even starting the very first class. I forgot to put a class on this. And I want to put it in that admin class. I'm going to save and close. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to close. And I'm going to look at that unclassified column. And there's something else there that wasn't classified. So that's why I set up that you can call it overhead. You could call it admin. This is kind of some dues subscription. I'm going to dump that into admin. So a lot of people who don't set that class up use sort of unclassified transactions for those transactions that aren't program level. Okay. I'm going to have to ask a question, and maybe Heidi, you can answer this question, because we had tried to agree on about a 30-minute question and answer session. Starting on page 33 was going to be a discussion of journal entries. And my example was doing a journal entry versus a sales receipt and how that will show in QuickBooks. There are times when we do journal entries. I'm not saying never do them, but I try to drive people to forms because of that source and target kind of idea. Is that something, and my example, by the way, is moving money from admin class into a specific program class. Is that meaningful, or should we just skip that and get to question and answers?
I don't personally do a lot of journal entries. I don't know what the rest of the crowd is up to.
Maybe somebody could chime in who's out there, and does that example resonate with you, or should we just skip it?
We have some answers in the chat, and they're saying that they only do journal entries when they're directed to by their accountant.
Okay. So that's a good thing. Yay, you all. So a journal entry or a sales receipt could be used if you need to move money within programs. Okay, so let's just keep that in the back of our brains. The other thing, when you are instructed by your accountant to do journal entries, just make sure you understand why. I have seen accountants, because they have a tax perspective that they're applying to your books. And so I've actually seen some accountants instruct journal entries that, let's say, throw off the opening balance of a checking account, because I don't know, they're not thinking straight about what accounts to use on that journal entry. So I always sort of advise clients, in of course in a respectful way, but these are your books, and a good understanding of what that accountant is expressing to you to do is important. And again, you can do some training by running those before and after reports as you do those journal entries if you need to sort of solidify what's happening there. So, okay, then finally, then the last page of your handout, you know, when I talk about keyboard shortcuts, it's like, hey, if you're doing something a lot, maybe you want to, like, if you love this edit find, I mean, a lot of people know Control F from everywhere, right? If you liked that Control Y to see that transaction journal, so you see source and target data, you know, that may be one that you learn. There are a ton of shortcuts in QuickBooks. You know, when you're in a form and you're in the amount field, you know, you can actually invoke a calculator. I just did a ×2 and enter. So if you're getting frustrated or you feel like there should be an easier way, your brain is right. So just Google that, right? And try to find an easier way. So there's some ideas of shortcuts for you if you're interested in looking at penny lanes on page 37. So that's it for me. So it is a little less than 30 minutes. Sorry about that. About 25 minutes that we have left for question and answers. Hopefully answers. And hopefully questions.
And I apologize. Everybody probably understands that my internet went out and my phone isn't working. So I'm just calling in, so I can't see the chat.
Oh.
But Kay is on it and she's helping out.
Heidi, there's nothing currently in the chat that I think needs brought up. I know that I personally had emailed you a couple of questions. Did anyone else email you?
No, you were the only one that emailed me, so that would be great to go over that stuff.
Okay, forgive
Just
me.
overwhelming.
Okay, I had a question specific in the other names. Currently mine is set up where each employee is entered 3 different times in other names, additionally to them being in there as an employee. It's used, one of them's used for recent reimbursement, one's used for IRA, and one's used for our HSA. Do you have suggestions of how this could be cleaned up? Could this be cleaned up with class? My understanding is the reason it was set up like that was the supervisors wanted to be able to see that separately instead of in one big check.
So normally, and I guess it depends on if you're using payroll in QuickBooks or not, but normally those kinds of reimbursable expenses, IRA contributions, 401k contributions, health plan contributions are handled through payroll at a payroll item level so that you could report against that payroll item, right? So that you could do a report, you know, that item is associated with the employee name. So it's on their actual payroll detail check, but you can also generate a payroll item report if you want to see those all together. And those reports would be customizable. Did that answer that question? I've never heard it handled that way before, with having multiple names to track multiple contributions.
I had never seen it before I started here either. And I know that it's a mess. I just don't know how to fix it. I do not do my own payroll. We have a bookkeeper here in town that I give hours to, and she gives it back. But the line itemization that I do on the pay stub, if you will, on the check voucher is very messy. And this is not a format to discuss it. I was just curious if you'd ever heard of anyone doing it like that, or if anyone else had a mess like that in their system.
I found a lot of messes when I first started, Kay, and finally I just got kind of frustrated and started over with a new QuickBooks file that used the way things should be done.
And that's honestly, I've gotten very close to that many times. It's, you know, I've gone through with my bookkeeper, the person that does our auditing, a few times, and it's made very clear that the last few people that were doing it, and they've even been honest and told me, you know, I didn't really understand QuickBooks. I was doing the best I could. But because of that, like so many of us, I think we inherit quite the mess. And trying to decide where that line is of should we start over or continue to fix it is
Yeah, you know, I would imagine that your bookkeeper would, you know, you mentioned that you had a discussion with that person about this situation, but I would problem solve that with her. Again, I think depending on how messy it is and if your numbers are accurate, I think that bottom line gut feel that you have, do I trust these numbers or not, is really what, or it's just such a mess because I guess there wasn't a clear understanding of who should be on a customer list, what a class list should be used for. And a lot of times that gets messy on the chart of accounts just because we're trying to figure out how to get the kind of reports we want.
And I think like so many others have mentioned, I hadn't started over because I was under the impression, I was told, like so many others have said, that we had to use bars. But now that other districts are saying that they don't, I think it gives more validity to starting over and building my own COA. Heidi, were you able to pull the results from that poll before you got kicked off?
I was not. I actually am trying to get my coworker to do it for me right now. But I can just text you my information, Kay, and maybe you can pull it for me.
Okay. The reason why some districts are in bars and some aren't is a lot of times we weren't originally using bars, but Lori Zeller, there was a thing that came out saying that because we are technically kind of a government agency, we are supposed to be following that format. But you know, we're so small, we don't get checked or audited. It is a preference. Luckily, the department, they take our reports every year, so there's no real issues on that. So I think it's going to be just what you're wanting to do. But that's how bars came up. Why some use it, some don't. It was at a recommendation of Lori a few years ago.
Thank you so much for that clarification.
You know, I can, I'm just looking at a couple of the chats here that came in, it looks like pretty recently. Somebody says they don't like timesheets. Somebody's asking about, does anybody else do timesheets? You know, maybe that's something for you all to discuss. Could you cover finance charges assessments? Was one thing in the chat. So would you like me to address that?
Absolutely.
So finance charging is under edit preferences. I'm on finance charge. So it's a company level preference that you set up. So it's basically, you know, do you want a per annum interest rate, a minimum, a grace period? What account does this point to? Do you want to assess finance charges on overdue finance charges? Calculate those from due date or invoice date? So you set up a company preference. And so based on the terms on your invoices, finance charges can be assessed, and they end up being an additional invoice that you would send to your customer. So you set those preferences up under Edit Preferences. And I don't have that set up in this company file. Not many people do that because I think there is some difficulty in collecting finance charges. I'm just going to check some chats here to see if I. Did that help on that finance charge question? Okay. You're welcome. There was also a question out there in chat about uncashed checks that are years old, you know, and they're always going to show up in your reconciliation. And yeah, at some point you void them. You void those and you make sure you put a good memo in there on what the amount was and, you know, the age of the item, you know, the reason that you would void. And I think several people are doing that same thing out there in the districts. So anything else at all in terms of questions from our 3 2-hour sessions?
Again, thank you, Allison. It's been great.
Oh, thank you for that feedback. I really appreciate it. You know, and I am looking forward to sort of a next step. And I know that every district is going to have certain nuances, or, you know, they feel really comfortable with the way their company file is set up, so they're not going to change it, you know, which is totally fine. I mean, that's what we want, right? Comfort and confidence. What could be better than that? It seems like it would be nice to just have something out there for best practices. Just as, you know, recommendations and why it works this way and what reporting you get out by having a certain setup, or maybe a certain setup gives you all really a bare bones setup that gives you the reporting structure that you need for what you do. So I would be so interested in being a part of those conversations if that's the next step. And I just want to thank Heidi, and I think Kay had something to do with sort of being Heidi's wing person on this. So thank you. And Eric did some things with technical setup, setting up these Zoom meetings for us. So thank you. And thank you all for your attendance.
We also really need to thank the MACD Education Committee, because they are the ones that funded this free training. So thank you to all the folks on that committee as well, because this would have cost money had they not been generous with their funds. So we got the results of that survey back, and it really is about 50-50, the people who use bars and the people that don't. That's really interesting to me. Just so everyone knows, that was Ginger's answer to her question yesterday at the end.
Can I just say that the only reason I took the time to convert to bars was to make that Department of Administration report about 5 minutes versus several hours. So for me, it was worth it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's been really easy for me to use that system as well. I think the one other thing that I had kind of written down from some of the chats was the reconciliation. And for those of you who are new or who do things differently, at Lake County, we have a financial committee. And so I'm not the only one that touches our books. There are other people, and there are 2 supervisors that I work with that help me out with all the financial stuff. So when I do my reconciliation monthly, I have a supervisor that comes in and does my QuickBooks reconciliation. There was also some feedback that Chris Evans has her financial person take a look at it and she checks it off, right, Chris?
Yeah, my bank statements go to a supervisor who double checks the copies of all the checks for signatures, et cetera. And then I have a second supervisor who does an annual financial review, who I pull the reports she asks me to pull, and she's very familiar with QuickBooks and has used it for years. So then she goes through and checks all my backups and the reconciliation statements and everything.
Nice. And then I had seen some feedback from Lorna, I think at Shoto, that she takes her reconciliation to her board meeting and a board member initials it there. So for all of you out there, the reconciliation is a really good opportunity to engage your board members in helping you with your finances. And if you have any other questions on that, of course, we can help answer, but there are just a lot of different examples of what you can do. But hopefully all of you have one board member that cares about your finances, because it is their responsibility to know about them. It's not just our responsibility. And then I don't know if there were any other questions about the 310 tracking and the supervisor in-kind hours. I guess, Allison, would you be able to update that document that you gave us with a little information on that in-kind stuff, and I could send it out to everybody?
Do you mean the volunteer hours, the time tracking?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, great. Yeah, if it's just a little addition or whatever, I can send it out to everyone who was on this training.
Okay.
So they
sure.
have it as well. And I apologize for not being able to get back to you sooner on that.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
I can't see the chat, so I don't know if there's anything else going on in there.
I've been kind of looking at it.
Lorna's asking some questions about the timesheets. Lorna, did you just want to unmute and ask what your question is?
I'm not hearing anything. I don't know if that's my problem or.
I'm not hearing her either. I can see she unmuted, but. Okay, so she just sent a message that she's having problems unmuting. So she's curious if anyone uses the timesheets in QuickBooks and if they like it. There was some other feedback earlier in the chat that Diane said she tried it and she didn't like it.
I've never even tried using it. I kind of just found out about it in this training.
I've used it a lot for a construction company, but I'd never thought of using it for tracking our supervisors and their mileage and things like that.
Yes, the decision point on using that, obviously, if you are doing your own payroll, people have those timesheets tied into that process. So they're not adding hours in multiple places. So that would be one reason why people out there would be using timesheets, would be to be tracking their own time. So I think it is is it nice to use the database structure that is already built for you in QuickBooks? You know, this isn't that complicated in terms of tracking, especially if you get the report from your supervisor that you're using as your audit trail on what your reimbursement is, or however you're doing that for time and or mileage. So I guess the decision point, if you wanted to use that, would be do the QuickBooks report, and does that database structure save you time? Does it give you what you need? Is it that cross-reference, you know, for audit trail purposes that shows that, you know, but the report that your supervisor gave you matches with what you've entered? But if that's just double work, then there probably wouldn't be a way to do it. It might be nice to do if you do have a program and there are non-supervisory people who are donating their time, you know, like 4th grade ag days. You know, if you wanted to track volunteer hours associated with a program, you know, maybe that would be a use for it. And you wouldn't use it for your supervisor. So it might not be black and white in terms of its purposes. You know, just generally when I'm working with clients, my general recommendation is to put more detail into QuickBooks at the beginning and learn the reports so that you're not missing something. You know, if you're doing a lot in Excel, like I just helped a client start a new nonprofit company file because she was maintaining like, you know, 10 different Excel sheets tracking different things because QuickBooks wasn't set up right. So it's, you know, it's those kinds of indicators that you need to look for in terms of saving you time at being more accurate, having a better audit trail, having better reports for your board, your supervisor, your treasurer.
Heidi, Mary made a comment in the chat box that says, I wonder if Allison would be available to do a supervisor training on how to read these reports. Heidi and Allison, maybe we can connect later.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
Great idea.
that'd be great. I have a supervisor who is very well versed in QuickBooks, which is crazy, I know. And so he has taught me a lot about these reports and about the reports that he can look at and immediately know what's going on. And so, yeah, that would be cool to set up a training like that.
Hi, this is Brandy from Ponderay. Heidi, I had to miss yesterday. Is there a time frame that you're planning on getting the recorded sessions up?
Yeah, I think Kay has them pretty much all done, and we should be able to share that maybe even at the end of the day.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Allison.
Oh, yes. Thank you
Very
for
good
your
information. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for your attendance.
Yeah.
Great. Well, if there are no other questions or comments, I know yesterday I had maybe asked everybody to hang around for just a couple of minutes so we could discuss SWAT training really quickly. And SWAT stands for Statewide Administrators Training. For those of you who don't know, I realized yesterday that I just kept saying SWAT. So
Heidi,
Allison,
I think
yeah.
I'm going to say goodbye.
Yeah, I was going to say, Allison, thank you so much for everything. And I will be in touch with you in the future.
Okay, I look forward to that. And I'll put a little something together about this timesheet.
Wonderful. Yep. And I'll send that out to everybody.
Nice to meet you. Take care.
Thanks, Allison. I don't know, Katie Mumford. I don't know if you're on.
Yep, I'm here.
Cool. Yeah, I thought that since we have some people that will hopefully be going to this SWAT training, I don't know if we want to